Hello, hello, and welcome back to Retrieving Sanity with your podcast host Keegan. And today we have a very special guest, and his name is Willie, and he is a descendant from Holocaust survivors, and he's now an author of a book called Out from the Shadows. Did I get that right?
You did get it right. Way to go.
Sweet. So how are you doing today, Willie?
I'm doing well. All things considered, I'm here.
All things considered, huh? I'm sorry to hear that some things aren't going the best, the way that they could be going, but what is it that your book is actually about, real quick?
Well, and there's a whole backstory to that book too. It's
Of
the
course.
book I never wanted to write.
That's good.
Yeah, I am I've been an author for, I've been writing books for the last 10 years, around there, maybe more, 12 years. And, so I have a number of fiction books out, and they're not novels. And it was, I guess, at the start of the pandemic, those darn pandemic projects. So
Right.
my wife tried to convince me that I should do a book about my family story. And
Interesting.
I thought, no, my parents were Holocaust survivors, of course, as mentioned, and I'm going, oh, I don't know if I want to do this. And I said, I really don't know anything, because my parents, like many Holocaust survivors, did not really talk about their experience, especially my dad. And for two reasons. One is they kind of want to spare their kids hearing these horrible things, and though they do slip out from time to time. And the other reason is they don't want to, they're suffering from trauma, and they rather kind of like leave it buried. And
Yeah,
so
for sure.
I remember, I guess, when I first started this, I wrote a blog post with everything I know about my parents' background. It was 1,800 words. That was it.
Wow. That's
Yeah.
short.
So my wife kind of pushed me, and then I thought about it and tried to think of reasons why I should do it. If I didn't know the stories, then like nobody in the family knows. And I thought, why their story is they're just two of, I don't know, 1 million people survived, whatever, but their story is still important.
Yeah,
And important to the family. So I thought I would start working on it. And also, it was time there was a rising anti-Semitism, even before October 7th. And I thought maybe it was just the right thing to do. So I kind of just went at it.
Okay.
And so that's the backstory, right?
Yeah. Well, to the book.
What the book is about.
Yeah, the backstory to the book. But what is the book about?
What is the book about? So the book basically, I did incredible amount of research because I didn't know a lot. And like I went to archives and databases, and
Oh
I
boy.
looked up all kinds. I read books, very like from historians and articles, and I started gathering information.
Yeah.
And so when I sat down to write, it's kind of into a few pieces. One is the history of my family, both my mother's family and my father's family. My father was from Poland. My mother was from Romania.
Okay.
And then it was their experience during the war. And then they came at some point after the war, not until 1953, they came to Canada. And and I was born in 1953.
Congratulations.
Thank you so much. It was better that I was born than not. And so it's about my childhood growing up.
Okay.
And then and then the end of the book is a lot about intergenerational trauma, which I didn't really know I had until I actually started writing the book.
Interesting. How did you figure out that you had intergenerational trauma? Was it interviewing people? Was it sitting there reading anything and then you just go, hey, that's me?
No, what happened was I approached this like all my other books. That was absolutely that was just dumb. And what I discovered what happened is it was like writing it was transformational. It really,
Interesting.
really, really was. And I interviewed my siblings and other family members, and I tried to remember all these stories that I needed to have in the book and anecdotes. And as these memories returned, all this trauma that I had locked up inside of me just got released. And at
Ooh.
some point, I literally fell apart.
Oh man. I am so sorry to hear that.
Like it was bad news.
Yeah.
And so I realized, wow, one day I met with a therapist and she says, why are you here? And I'm going, I think I have intergenerational trauma.
How did she handle hearing that intergenerational trauma? A lot of people don't even know what that is.
Well, this therapist actually sort of, it's one of her areas of specialty. I had looked
Sweet.
her up, so
Okay.
she does understand intergenerational trauma, and not necessarily not from Holocaust survivors. I think I was the first one that she actually ever worked with, but
Okay.
she had the experience and with trauma itself. So, and I've been working with her ever since.
Oh.
So I'm actually much better now. Probably several years ago, I would not have been able to do this interview. I would have just fallen apart.
Oh man. Well, you look and sound amazing. So the work that you're doing with her is really working.
It really made a difference. It was not easy.
No.
And no, I quit probably about 3 times because I accused her of making me worse, and quickly came back because that's kind of part of the process. And I guess you probably have listeners who going nodding their heads as I speak. That as you're talking about all this stuff, more stuff comes out. And
Yeah.
you get worse and worse, and then eventually you kind of start to
Level out.
crawl back out of that hole, and that's kind of where I was. So
Yeah.
what I learned was and the book pretty much lays out kind of like how all that trauma manifests itself. I did an incredible job for decades bearing it. I literally built a brick wall around me. Some of the traits that I had was I didn't trust people. I didn't have very few people like allowed to get close to me. When people read that memoir, they were like shocked because
Wow.
there's so much in there they did not know about me. Even friends I've known for years, decades. And so I was very distrustful of people. I had issues with attachment and abandonment. And a lot of that sort of manifests itself from my childhood, which you're probably going to say, what was your childhood like?
Well, I mean, if you had childhood trauma, then that obviously was what you buried, right? So how was your childhood?
And it's interesting because, trauma is trauma, but there's different sources of trauma, right?
Yeah.
Right? You could be a victim of sexual violence or other forms of violence. In my case, it was, certain aspects of my childhood, but as well, I inherited stuff that was not due to my childhood, which I can sort of get into a little bit.
Yeah.
My childhood, my parents were, they came to this country with nothing. They came to Canada with absolutely nothing, and they just started a new life, and they worked real hard like every other immigrant, but they're also very traumatized. And so their focus was on the basic necessities: housing, clothing, food, emotional support. No. I was no one to help me with homework, no one to help me with problems at school or with other people. No one take me to sports or anything like that. You grew up very quickly.
Yeah.
And so you have this sort of feeling of alienation alone. Your parents are very loving, But I sometimes refer to it as they were, how do I say it? They were sort of clueless and useless. And not to say, to me, be mean to them, but
No,
they just
no, no.
weren't able to provide the kind of support. You grow up very quickly, and you're kind of, in a very young age, in a survival mode.
Yeah. Yeah,
And that's kind of how I grew up. And there were a lot of, I would call, I guess, a lot of social skills and just everyday kind of things that you needed to know, life skills. I had to learn them on my own.
yeah, that's rough.
So
That's
it
really
was,
rough.
and it was not a happy household.
I'm sorry to hear that.
And so that was kind of like, that was kind of where I came from. But as I got older, I kind of like just shut it all down and kind of sort of went on with life and functioned very well. Actually, I shouldn't say relatively well. I functioned very well until I didn't.
Yeah, that is kind of how it usually goes for some people, right? They operate well with the traumas because they buried it, and then something usually comes along and breaks the camel's back, so to say. So, what kind of tipped the iceberg for you on that? Was it anything in particular? Was it a certain instance, or was it something that just culminated over a period of time over a certain subject?
Well, it's interesting you asked that because, when people ask me that question, I just said it was just like as I remembered more and more. But that's not entirely true. As I think about it, there was a moment that has just killed me, and I still carry that around. And what that was is my father lost his family in the war. He was married and had 2 kids, and they were murdered. But he only told us, the weird thing was, he said that he was married and had 1 daughter. And my mother even, they didn't meet until after the war. My mother, was her understanding as well. So I was really confused because he used to say, my daughter, she was 4 years old when she died. So I was trying to figure out, when did she die, and when was she born, and when did she die? And I had all kinds of records, and nothing was making sense. And so I reached out and contacted a Polish archive where he was born. Okay. And I asked for marriage registration information so I'd know when he was married, because I had no clue, and when his daughter was born. And I came back with the marriage registration and his birth registrations for 2 daughters.
Oh, wow.
And that was the moment where I fell apart.
Really?
And then suddenly I realized that all his grief that he carried around in his life was passed on to me. He was really heavy. And not only that, he used to say she was 4 years old when she was killed. And he was referring to the older daughter. As it turns out, they were 11 months and 27 months. I actually found out when they were murdered.
Wow.
He did not. He probably didn't even know.
Yeah.
But I found it all out, and
wow, that's really.
I still get triggered all the time on that one, and it's been difficult.
Yeah, I can imagine that's really difficult.
And there were other things, but that was the big one.
Yeah, that's really rough.
Yeah, and I think as it seems, I took it harder than anyone else in the family. They were just kind of shocked, and I was just. And I guess it was partly because I had been spending months and months doing all this research, and this was not something I expected.
Yeah, and do you feel like there was a sense of betrayal there or mistrust?
No.
No.
No,
It it was a
My
train of,
father was so traumatized, he buried the memory of his younger daughter.
yeah. So you actually picked up a trait for bearing trauma. You didn't necessarily just learn to do it. It was passed on to you
Yeah,
unknowingly
yeah,
and genetically
obviously.
even. Yeah.
Yeah. And so,
Sorry.
no, and so that's kind, I mean, that's kind of, that's basically the journey I've been on for the last 5 years.
Boy.
And,
It,
and, and so what impact it had on me? As I said, it was transformational. I decided I stopped writing fiction books and I've
ah.
sort of dedicated my life to community of descendants of survivors.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason I did that was I realized, I never spoke to anybody about my experiences.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't do it as a kid. I avoided the topic, even as an adult. And then I
Mm-hmm.
realized, so is everyone else.
Yeah.
And so everyone like me is walking around like on eggshells,
Mm-hmm.
afraid to even talk about their experiences and just keeping it all bottled up.
Yeah.
So I decided to write another book.
Ah.
And it will be called, because I'm only partway through the writing, it will be called
Okay.
The Hidden Victims.
Ooh.
Because they're all traumatized as well.
Mm-hmm.
It's all been passed down and what we call intergenerational trauma.
Yeah. And that's crazy to think that intergenerational trauma is being passed down like that unknowingly. And that ripple effect is huge because you had how many siblings? Two. So that right there can culminate in who knows how many more branches from your family tree, you know?
And as I was doing the research, I was interviewed 98 people,
Mm-hmm.
both children and grandchildren of Holocaust survivors. I thought when I was doing my memoir, I thought I
Mm-hmm.
read somewhere that with each generation, it kind of gets less
Mm.
pronounced or profound.
Mm-hmm.
That's not what I found. I
Really?
found in many
Interesting.
cases the grandchildren were worse than their parents. They had more
Hmm.
trauma than their parents.
And that's interesting, and it kind of makes sense because trauma is more like a sticky ball or a snowball. And so if it goes downhill, it's just going to get more and more. So it takes active work to actually get rid of the trauma and either
Right.
stop it.
That's
And
exactly what I found. That I realized is that their parents
mm-hmm,
didn't deal with their trauma and passed it on. But what's
mm-hmm,
interesting is the third generation understands it much better and are
huh,
much more open and vocal and are taking steps to make sure that it stops with them and
ooh,
doesn't get passed on to their children.
oh man, becoming cycle breakers for the
Yeah.
better.
And that's part of the purpose that I'm writing the book is
Okay.
to get people, especially the second generation, to
Mm-hmm,
open up and talk more. And I'm hoping the book will be a catalyst to do that. And
mm-hmm,
also to help families understand you have to break that. It's not a cycle, but that whole flow
mm-hmm.
down from one generation to the other, because it is possible to do.
Yeah. And it's not easy work, and you should know about it because you're essentially breaking the cycle yourself, doing all the work that you're doing. And not only that, but you're pushing positive work back out into the world. So, I mean, in a sense, this work is a therapy for you, isn't it? Kind of, sort of.
It's like a mission now, and
It's a
Um,
purpose.
I provide some of these people. I provide a lot of support for. I'm now
Mm-hmm.
out talking about the trauma and
Mm-hmm.
speaking to people like you, but also in front of live groups as well, and talking about anti-Semitism because you
Mm-hmm.
can't talk about inherited trauma without talking about where the trauma came from.
Yeah, exactly. And because, like you mentioned earlier, there's different forms of trauma. And just because it happened to, say, anyone or any certain group of people doesn't mean it can't happen again, right?
Right. And And what I realized as well, especially when I interview all these people, that many of them had different sources of trauma.
Mm-hmm.
Some of them were abused. And what I realized is you can't separate what traits came from which kind of trauma. It's just layered on top of each other. And so the more trauma you're exposed to, the worse you are. The other thing I realized as I was speaking to people is that who are the worst? People like me who had two parents who are Holocaust survivors as opposed to only one, which tends to suggest you're getting a double dose. It's like a vaccine. You're getting a double dose. But also there's not the parent who can sort of moderate the impact of your childhood. So, if one parent isn't a great, doesn't have the best parenting skills, then, the other one
Kind of picks up the slack.
pick up the slack. And that doesn't happen necessarily in a two Holocaust survivor household.
Yeah. And like you said earlier, it's not because they can't necessarily. It's more or less inexperienced and unknowledgeable. And that can be a big deal. So simply knowing about it and how to deal with it is really kind of the starting point, wouldn't you say?
Yeah. And, when I spoke to people about their childhood, and I'd ask about their parents' parenting skills, other things kind of jumped out at me.
Well, like what?
So not like people who survived the Holocaust, they either were able to get out of Europe and right before it was too late, and or they went into hiding. And I spoke to a lot. I did not realize how many people actually, their parents actually, how many Holocaust survivors actually were in hiding, and many of them were children, or the teenagers would go into the woods and join sort of partisans, and sort of and become almost like guerrillas, guerrilla fighters.
Yeah.
And so they all had different kinds of experience, and so a lot of the people who were hidden were children. They were hidden in religious orders or sometimes just with, Gentile people. Farms, all kinds of stuff. But what happens is, you're 10 years old and you're separated from your parents. So, and you're not in school and you don't have any friends anymore. And what happens is their social development is frozen in time.
Yeah,
so,
that's rough.
So I'm talking to these people, and they said, growing up, I felt like I was the parent. So there was a lot of role reversal. And
Interesting.
Others, when do you learn to cook? You learn to cook in your teenage years, but if you're in the middle of a war, you're not learning how to cook. You're just learning to survive. And so, like, some people didn't have domestic skills.
Yeah.
So they didn't have, their education was stopped, their social development stopped, all kinds of things were stopped, and they lost families.
Yeah.
So that's like one of the observations I found. So many, some people had very, very had happy childhood because their parents were able to bury it and just kind of keep it out of sight.
But that didn't necessarily stop the trauma from actually building on, though, eventually.
No, it was still passed on.
Yeah.
Right? It was still passed on. That's the thing is that, and then I started asking them questions and it would all start to come out. I have to tell you, doing those interviews was incredibly triggering.
I can imagine.
It was not easy to do. And my wife was begging me to stop.
Oh, man.
My therapist was suggesting maybe you should cool off a little bit, and I just decided I need to get through them all.
Yeah.
So they were not easy. These stories were not easy to listen to. I had people who cried right through the entire interview.
Wow. Yeah.
It was
mean, with so much trauma, I can't imagine someone not necessarily crying.
I'm not a healthcare professional. I'm a writer.
Yeah, and so that kind of puts you.
What do I know about mental health other than I have problems with my own mental health?
Yeah, and so you're kind of in an awkward position of getting these people's stories in their most vulnerable parts of them too, and having to sit there and kind of comfort them. But I'd say that did you let them know you went through similar things, that you had parents that were also survivors?
That's right. So I had this standard thing that, I'm a child of Holocaust survivors. I wrote this memoir and now I'm following it up with this book about intergenerational trauma, blah, blah, blah. And I would thank them for trusting me to tell their story. And they would say, well, you're one of us. Why wouldn't I? And so there was
That's awesome.
a lot of people, to be honest, a lot of people kind of reached and they sort of connected with me.
Yeah.
I'm friends with some of these people now, in fact, but it was an extremely difficult process I would not want to do again.
I can imagine. It seems like a lot of the really good things in life are really difficult to get to, and even though we can enjoy the fruits of the labor, we don't want to do the labor again. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with that.
So I'm really excited about finishing this book. There are a lot of people waiting to read it. So in the meantime, I'm working away, but my memoir has done very, very well because people sort of picked up. There's a lot of stuff in there about trauma as well, and so there are people who. I think there are people who kind of fall into several groups. People who know me going, "Oh, I didn't know you had all these issues." Right? There are people who basically did not know me, and they would kind of identify with my story because they've had their own experiences.
Yeah.
And then there were people who, most of them are not Jewish, who read the stories in there and were in shock. Absolute shock. I had no. They basically, the book is, I should know how to describe it, but the book is, I tell the story, in the first part of the book, I tell the story of the Holocaust.
Okay.
And not a lot of detail, but enough detail. I did a lot of research, especially the regions where my parents came from. And then I placed my family in the story. And so you learn about the Holocaust and how it impacted on my family as you're reading the book. And it's actually a very compelling read.
That's a very interesting take on that, because a lot of the time it's just firsthand accounts, but you're actually taking the historical accounts and mixing it with what account you have from your family.
Right. And so the whole story of the Holocaust ends up being sort of, this is the way the book is very well constructed in this way. So the whole story of the Holocaust feeds into my childhood, because all those things that happened directly impacted on myself and my siblings.
Yeah.
And that's where people going, aha, wow, I didn't realize that.
Yeah.
And so the other I guess I should mention is,
Okay.
there were a lot of things I didn't like about my father. He was a difficult, complex man. And it sort of comes out in the book. I remember one person who left a review said, the author's father sounds like a horrible person. Well, he wasn't a horrible person. He was a damaged person.
Ooh, yeah.
But he frustrated me to no end. And now, after I wrote the book, I see my parents, and they were embarrassing too, because they were immigrants, and they weren't just ordinary groups; they were damaged immigrants on top of it. And now I look back and I see them in an entirely different light. That they were heroic. That they were able to push aside horrible events that they experienced and go on to live semi-normal lives and raise a family. And that, considering, is heroic. And The only regret is never telling them that.
Oh, and that's really good that you were able to have your views change like that, and I'm sure that they know that you feel that way now.
Well,
Yeah.
I was not exactly mean to them, but I don't think they probably did not really know how I felt.
You know,
So,
I think a lot of parents and their children have that kind of disconnect, and I think that the child never really fully understands the amount of love and the extent of love that the parents gave and what they could do, while they're around. I think it's a little after the fact. Or it takes a lot of trauma in other areas to make someone realize something about their parents. Myself, for example, I didn't realize my parents were heroes in their own right until I was in rehab myself,
you go.
And it's changed my outlook on a lot of things. So I can imagine that having your parents change in your mind just changed everything else too.
And and they were very loving. But as I said, at times they were like useless and clueless.
Well,
And
like you
that
said,
was
they were damaged.
not their fault.
Yeah, they were damaged.
But I was, there were times I was like annoyed, disappointed, pissed off. Because, I wanted to grow up like other kids.
Yeah.
And I knew I was different. And, but, and at times you try and distance yourself from your parents because you want to be like every other Canadian kid.
Yeah. It's just natural to be part of a community, part of a group. And
So now I have a new community. It's other damaged people like me.
yeah, but it's not only just that, but y'all are cycle breakers, right?
Yeah.
And y'all need help from each other. Y'all need support. Y'all need all of that. And who better to lead the way than someone that's doing it themselves?
And so I have like all kinds of projects had boiling away in my head when I finish this book.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, because I'll keep working on new stuff until I drop dead.
That's good.
And that's what I figure.
So real quick, for everyone out there listening, what websites do you got?
Okay, so I do have a website. It's williehandler.com, WILLIEHANDLER.
Okay.
And there's a blog there, but I've also now migrated to Substack, which is where all the writers are going.
Yeah,
And
that's
so
true, huh?
if people are on Substack or they're interested, because there are I write a lot of interesting posts on all kinds of topics on Substack while I'm writing my book. And so they can find me there. My books are on Amazon.
Okay.
But they'll probably be most interested. My other books are very, very good, but they're funny books. And if you want to have a good cry, you read my memoir.
Is it My Personal Journey to Inner Peace on Substack?
No, it is called. My account is called. I think it's called A Jew in the Wilderness.
I just found the
A
book.
Jew Lost in the Wilderness.
Found it. Okay. Let me get that put on screen for everyone real quick. All right. Whoop.
There you almost there.
There we go.
And there's some very interesting stuff there.
Okay. Cool.
A little bit of everything, sample of my writing style. I have a very succinct style, so it's very easy to read.
Cool. Well, everyone be sure to check that out. It's going to be interesting keeping track of his progress as he works on more books.
And again, since this is about mental health, I repeat, I would not be here if I did not eventually relent and go to therapy. I could not be talking about this stuff. I could not be working on this next book without the help of my therapist, who I'm so attached to her that if anything happens to her, I'm going with her.
Yeah. I think I know how that goes. I have a
Right.
good relationship with my
And-
therapist as well.
And I know I along the way I've met a lot of people who've had not very good therapists, and or their therapist just didn't help them. And I think I've been incredibly fortunate because this is my first therapist.
Wow.
Yeah,
That's awesome.
that in itself is incredible.
Yeah, most
Because
people
the
go through
stories
like
I
two or
hear,
three.
people are hopping around until they finally find the right one. And I just, by chance, found the right one right off the bat.
That's
No,
really
I
cool.
did quit 3 times.
Yeah, because you felt like you were getting worse.
I was mad at her.
Yeah, and I mean that.
And being the real professional that she was just, and like there was a couple times where I was yelling at her, and she just sat there and she just took it. And then the next session I would apologize, and she says, "No, it's okay. You don't have to apologize." I said, "No, I do have to apologize."
I think that happens to a therapist more often than not.
Oh yes, I realize that. But I told her, that's not who I am. And so we have actually a very, very good relationship. I'm so pleased I found it. So, I think for people who are struggling with finding the right therapist, keep looking. They're out there.
Yep, they are definitely out there. You just have to look.
Yeah.
And a lot of it comes
it's
from
hit and
asking.
miss. Because
It's about
I
asking the
could
right questions.
recommend my person to you, and she might not help you because
Nope.
it's all about it's about whether or not you connect or not.
Yeah, it really is. And about that, figuring out if you're going to connect or not is about asking the right questions, right?
Yeah.
So you can't just do a Google search necessarily and be like, all right, I found spot number 3 and I'm going to call them and they're going to be my therapist for the rest of my life. Nope, you got to interview them while you're there.
Yeah. It's a messy process. They have to also be taking on new clients. You can only
Yep.
see so many people. So I remember
Yep.
she was not the first person I approached. The first couple of people I approached couldn't take on anybody new.
Nah.
So
It was actually a blessing in disguise, right? Because who knows? You may have not actually wound up
Right.
with the one that you got. So,
who knows where I would end up.
and then who
But-
knows? Maybe the
but,
book
you know,
wouldn't have
that's
even
kinda
been
like-
written.
That's kind of how life works, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Right.
You never know which way it's going to go. And sorry.
I don't make too many long range plans. I just worry about what I'm doing today.
Yeah. And worrying about what you do today is, I mean, sometimes all that you really can do at once, right?
Yeah.
How do you like to handle with your trauma nowadays? What are some of your go-to steps that you deal with your intergenerational trauma?
I have a list here somewhere
Okay.
I have a list here of things I can do. And
Okay.
I'm gonna just pull it up real quick. Okay, it's called My Game Plan for Triggers.
My game plan for triggers. All right.
Okay.
Let's hear it.
I think there's 7 here.
Gotcha.
Everybody taking notes? Remind myself this will pass in time. I've come out of these moments before. It's not the most
That's a good
effective
one.
way, but it's kind of part of it is reminding yourself this has happened before. I've come out of it, right?
Yeah,
And so it's not the end of the world.
Okay.
Letting my wife know that I've been triggered because I sometimes don't tell her, and tell her to turn off the news. Nothing worse. There's nothing worse these days than watching the news, right?
No, not at all. Well,
Okay.
a few things, but definitely
Not very
on the
few.
list.
Maybe like heroin. But heroin, at least you would feel good.
Yeah.
3, limit the amount of time social media.
Ooh, that's a good one.
Right? It is. Because it's like the news sometimes.
Yeah.
Spending time with grandchildren and animals. I didn't put it in the animals. I don't know what. I found a dead rabbit on my front porch this morning. I don't think that's what she had in mind.
No, probably should be
No.
alive.
Walking in nature in the woods, trying to or at least trying to visualize doing that.
Ooh, that's a good idea.
Exercising 5 to 10 minutes to get your heart rate up,
Uh-huh.
because that will help you come out.
Mm-hmm.
And also, I put together a trigger playlist on Spotify.
Trigger playlist, huh?
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
Oh, there's one more.
Ooh, so 8.
Oh, there's more. No. Oh, no. Wow. There's more here? Right. Frozen washcloth or ice cubes on your face for about 10 seconds of deep breathing, because it's kind of like a physical shock.
Yeah.
These are good.
That's pretty good.
Hot bath or sauna.
Ooh, yeah.
Smells. So kind of smells that are like hot bread or eucalyptus, if it's something you like. Look at photos of my grandkids. Excuse me. Notice when it lifts or feels better, and take positive moments or thoughts in which some butterfly hugs. So, you kind of like hug yourself and things like that. So that's
really good.
There's more here? Wow. Look at, I have, it's such a long list, I haven't even finished going through it. Say out loud if possible, or in your head, I lovingly and wholeheartedly accept myself even when I can't think of anything else. Whatever that means. So that's my trigger list. And and depending on where I'm at the moment, I'll use one of those things. Going out for a walk, there's like a sort of like woods not far from me, and so going through a walk is so relaxing. It's kind of, you feel you're away from everything. So that's really, really effective. But if it's pouring rain, you might not want to do that.
Or
so
at
you
least
go to
bring
something
an umbrella.
else. But that gives you sort of an idea.
Yeah.
So those are the kind of things. It's a long list, and you kind of do what works best for you.
Yeah. That's awesome. I'm so glad that you have more than 7 things to do.
There's 11 or 12 or something. Maybe there was more.
Well,
I never got to the bottom of the list.
I don't think a list like that could ever really be 100% done. Do you? Because as you dig up traumas, you just find more. And then I think, honestly, some traumas never really get fully healed all the way. Do you think they do?
Trauma never gets healed.
Never gets healed?
You can't get healed from trauma, but you learn to manage it.
Manage trauma.
You can't stop getting triggered. But what I've been taught is, here's a whole list of things you can do if you are triggered. And so that's managing it. So instead of going into a funk for 4 days, maybe I can pull myself out in a couple hours.
Yeah. There you go.
So is that healing? Not really, but it's, some conditions are chronic. I have chronic physical issues as well, not just mental health, and you learn to adapt and live with them and mitigate whatever negative impact it has on you.
Yeah. This is true. I do have some physical ailments myself, and so it does correlate back to the same thing, because our nervous system is part of our body.
Right.
So I guess once it is...
How many physical conditions are triggered by stress? Lots.
A lot.
Lot of stuff.
A lot.
So my therapist will be very proud that I read out her list on a podcast.
Yep, and you'll be able to even show her the whole episode and everything too.
You know what? I sent her links to episodes.
That's good. I hope she listens.
She likes listening to them. It's kind of weird.
Well, I don't know if it's necessarily weird, because you're diving into deeper stuff with her than you are with us. But I mean, it would be kind of a different persona of yours that is being exposed.
Oh, she's seen every side of me.
Well, there you go.
She's seen every side.
It can't be that much weirder. You'll get used to it. Have you gotten used to the sound of your own voice yet?
Oh yeah. I've done a whole bunch of podcasts. It's just to get my story out. And And
Yeah.
also, you never know who you're helping.
No, you don't.
You know, I was on one podcast. I haven't been on 100 or anything like that, but I was on one podcast, and the host passed on an email that he received from somebody who listened to it, who said it was life-changing for him.
Oh, wow.
And I feel great about that.
That's awesome.
It is awesome. And I'm thinking, well, then and they're worth doing.
Oh, yeah.
If you can touch people like that and make a difference in their lives. And that's part of what this next book that I'm writing about, that's why I'm writing it, to make a difference.
To make a difference.
Somebody I interviewed
Uh-huh.
sent me this map. Can you see what it says?
Difference maker.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Which I thought was very, very sweet.
Awesome that you're making impacts in people's lives, and you don't even know that you're necessarily doing it either. You are actively going out there and publishing things to make people's lives better, but that's kind of the thing, is that you're not going out there for the expectation of fan mail necessarily, right?
No. I get it, though. I actually do get some. Oh, yeah. People reach out to me all the time.
Which is super good, because that gives you outside support, outside validation, which helps provide purpose.
I had 2 whole sessions of therapy on this, because it used to make me very uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
And I eventually sort of talked my way through it all, but I felt very uncomfortable getting praise. And it's kind of part of my trauma.
Yep.
And I kind of eventually worked through it, and so now I'm fine with it.
That's
Do
good.
I need it? Do I need the validation? No, I've never have. So that's kind of the way I am. I decide what I'm doing is right, and I just do it.
That's awesome. That's a really good way to live life, so long as you're not hurting anyone in the process, right?
Well, yeah, if I get negative feedback, then hey, I'm the first one that if I've done something wrong, I will fix it.
There you go.
So,
and that is accountability, and accountability means a lot.
It does. It really does.
So with that being said, we are nearing the end of this episode, but we can hopefully look to see you in the future, correct?
Right. Yeah. Yeah, no. I think if down the road, when the next book is out, you're interested in talking about that in more detail. We spoke, we spoke a little bit about it. I'd be happy to return.
Yeah, I'd love to have you on. I'd love to catch up with you and see what all little bits of information you've picked up along the way, and what other experiences you may have had, and other triggers.
There's this whole thing on siblings that. Oh my God, that I just had no idea.
Oh yeah.
And now I have psychologists sending me papers.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
Yeah, because there are therapists out there who know I'm doing this work.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, maybe I should get you in touch with my therapist.
Really?
Yeah, that would be interesting. Maybe my therapist knows a little bit about you. Who knows? Maybe I'll have to ask.
Right. Okay.
That'd be interesting.
Well, it was nice meeting you, Keegan.
Oh, yeah, we are right at the end. So before we go, do you have anything you'd like to leave the audience with?
I think it's very important for people to get help if they're struggling, and don't give up. Yep. And I remember having this conversation over and over again that I'm never going to get better. And I kept being told by all kinds of people, there's light at the end of the tunnel. And it's true.
Yeah.
So keep it up. And I may as well one more time plug my book, which is...
Okay.
Because it's really an important book for many reasons. And... the $2 I make on each sale isn't going to make me rich. It's out from the shadows, growing up with Holocaust survivor parents, and you'll learn a lot about trauma in there.
Sweet. Well, everyone, be sure to check that out, and you can Google that, but you can also find links to that book on retrievingsanity.com once his guest profile is up. And you can also find that link in the episode description on YouTube and Spotify. And hey, I got one question for you, though.
Yeah.
Do you know a little number that someone can call whenever they are having a mental crisis of some sorts?
In Canada, I do.
Ooh, there's a Canada number.
Okay,
That's right.
because I have used it. And I'm trying to find it. Hang on.
Oh, man.
Hang
Okay.
on.
I wonder if it's the same as ours.
It's from my
ours is-
therapist. Let me find. All I have to do is find an email from her because it's always at the bottom of her emails.
Okay.
And I just have to remember what her name is. Okay. Here. 24/7 crisis line 1844 HERE 247.
So that
And
is...
there's more. She's giving me a few of them.
Yep.
Suicide and Crisis Hotline Canada-wide.
Ooh.
What?
That's awesome. So that is the Canada hotline, and the American hotline is 988. So
Okay.
anyone out there listening, if y'all have any kind of mental crisis going on, give that number a call because they will help you.
I have had the opportunity where I've used it, so
And it's a very valuable resource because without it, we may not have you around, right? It's a mental
who
crisis.
knows? Who knows?
You wouldn't be you where you're at, right?
Right. I
So-
remember telling my therapist, and she told me how proud she was that I used that I called. So
Yeah, that's a
I guess
big deal.
it is. For some people it's hard, but for me, it just seemed like the right thing to do.
Well, I'm really glad that you did it because I got to hear your story. So many other people are going to be able to hear your story and hear other people's stories. And because of that, other people are going to be able to start managing and healing and breaking cycles. So, Willie, I've got to thank you for being on the show. It has been a pleasure and an honor. And again, everyone, be sure to check out the book, Out from the Shadows, Growing Up with Holocaust Survivors and Holocaust Survivor Parents. There we go. But with that being said, we have come to the end of this episode. So, Willie, do you have any last words?
Goodbye.
Goodbye. All right. Everyone, you have a wonderful day, evening, whenever it is that you're listening to this recording. And everyone out there listening right now, y'all have a wonderful day. Thank you for listening on WDJY 99.1 FM. This is Keegan. Y'all have a good one. Shalom.
Okay.
All right, so that was Willie, and he told us all about intergenerational trauma, how he handles it, and how others can do the same. So be sure to check us out next week as we talk to Blake. And Blake is going to tell us all about his decade-long addiction, how he handles it now, and, well, just all about it. And it's a super awesome conversation. Be sure to check it out. Go on over to retrievingsanity.com, go over to YouTube, Spotify, wherever else you find a podcast. And I just want to say thank you again for listening to Retrieving Sanity. And as always, much love, and you have a good one. Shalom.